Shabbat Shalom and Happy Passover. So we had two Seders the last couple of nights, and I'm sure at your Seders you asked at least 4 questions. Maybe you asked more questions, hopefully. Questions are always good at the Seder. But I bet there's one question you may not have asked, and that is, what is that silly roasted egg doing on the Seder plate? You know, we don't eat it. We don't even look at it. We don't point to it. We don't say anything about it. It just sits there. What is that roasted egg doing? I mean, we know the matzah represents the bread of affliction our ancestors ate in Egypt, or maybe it's the bread that didn't have time to rise because we left in haste. The maror represents the bitterness of slavery in Egypt. The shank bone represents the Passover lamb. There's on many Seder plates chazeret, which is another kind of lettuce, which is another kind of bitter herb. By the way, for those of you who are from Israel, don't yell at me. I know, in modern Hebrew, chazeret means horseradish. I don't know how that happened. That's a modern thing. Clearly in Mishnaic Hebrew, chazeret means romaine lettuce. It's all the scholars agree. But anyway, whatever, doesn't matter. It's another kind of bitter herb. And then there's karpas, of course, the little sprig of parsley or carrots or whatever you put on that you dip in the salt water, which represents the tears of slavery, and we eat as an hors d'oeuvre at the beginning of the meal. And we dip the bitter herb in charoset, this fruit nut chutney that we're going to eat, so that's explained. We're eating it. We say that it represents the mortar between the bricks of the buildings we were building in Egypt. So what's the egg doing? We don't talk about it. We don't eat it. Why is it there? Well, so in the Mishnah, which was the original source for how we conduct a Seder, around the year 200, it says that you would have on the Seder plate matzah, the lettuce, charoset, and 2 cooked dishes. 2 cooked dishes. It doesn't say what they are or why they're supposed to be there, so then the Talmud naturally has to argue and supply several different possible answers. And the answer that's most commonly given for why we have 2 cooked dishes is 1, represents the Passover sacrifice, the Passover lamb, hence the shank bone. And the other one represents the other sacrifice we bring on Passover. And you're going to say, Rabbi, what other sacrifice was there? Well, Passover is also a pilgrimage festival. And the Bible tells us that when you go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, you don't come empty-handed when you're going to see God at the temple. You got to bring a present. And the present is a sacrifice. It's a festival offering. And it's brought on all 3 pilgrimage festivals. On Passover, it's in addition to the Passover lamb. So there's 2 animals that are then roasted and given back to you to eat, like Texas barbecue. In those days, by the way, before kitniot, we could have baked beans and coleslaw and potato salad with it. But in any case, 2 cooked dishes represent the 2 sacrifices. That's the usual answer given. So if the shank bone represents the Passover lamb, then the egg, which is supposed to be roasted and not just boiled, right? Why do you have to put it in the oven to turn it brown? Because it represents the festival offering. But that sort of begs the question, you might say, why an egg? It's going to get worse. Okay, so Rav Sherira Gaon, which was a Babylonian scholar around the year 950, he had a different explanation for the 2 cooked dishes. In fact, he said they represent Moses and Aaron. And then he said, by the way, some people put 3 cooked dishes on the Seder plate. So you've got Moses, Aaron, and, for all you feminists, their sister Miriam. 3 cooked dishes. And then he goes on to suggest that these 3 cooked dishes should be of a particular kind, because they should represent the feast that we're going to eat when the Messiah comes. Okay, Messianic times, we're all sitting around the table, according to one opinion, and there's constant food coming out, and we're feasting on a big banquet. And you probably know one of the big things we're eating, and that is called Leviathan. Have you heard of Leviathan? He's this mythical large fish that can feed millions of people. Well, the Jews wouldn't want to stop at Leviathan, so besides a big fish, we're also going to have a behemoth, which is a big ox-like creature, also mythical. We're going to eat him roasted. And then we're also going to have something from a ziz, which is a big bird. Not like the one from Sesame Street. More like a giant griffin, a mythical beast, a huge, enormous bird. And it's going to be roasted also. Why 3 animals? because in the Bible, the animal kingdom's always divided up into three categories. Animals on land, the behemoth, animals in the water, the leviathan, and animals that fly in the air, the ziz bird. Okay, so the shank bone represents behemoth, it's a land animal. The egg represents the ziz bird. Birds lay eggs. That leaves us with the leviathan. What is the fish? Where's the fish? Gefilte fish, of course. So now we're eating all three mythical beasts that we're going to eat in the Messianic era, which gives the Passover Seder this Messianic symbolism, which we're also going to point out at the end of the Seder when we open the door for Elijah, who comes right before the Messiah comes. So we have this sort of Messianic idea at the Passover Seder. So maybe the egg represents the ziz bird. Or maybe, probably what you thought at the beginning of my talk, the egg represents springtime and the cycle of life and rebirth. So it turns out that you probably know that Easter has Easter eggs and Easter bunnies. Before Judaism, and therefore before Christianity, there was a pagan spring festival which celebrated the rebirth of nature because the trees are blossoming and everything's coming back to life. And at these rebirth ceremonies the pagans had, they would have fertility symbols to represent that, including eggs and bunnies. For Christians, these symbols came to represent the resurrection of Jesus, the rebirth of Jesus. And for us, it came to symbolize the festival offering. Now, would that mean that having an egg on the Seder plate is for the birds? Not exactly. We Jews have often taken symbolic elements from the surrounding culture and adapted them for Jewish purposes. In this case, the most commonly understood reason for the egg at the Seder plate is it represents the festival offering that otherwise wouldn't be represented at the meal. It's not mentioned in the Seder because it has no specific significance to Passover, and it's not eaten because we don't eat festival offerings anymore. So we just look at it on the Seder plate. Now, if all of this leaves you a little exasperated or has scrambled your mind, relax, have 4 cups of wine, you'll get over it. And remember that at the end of the Seder we say, next year in Jerusalem.
All right, I'll never eat eggs the same. I appreciate it. Thank you, Rabbi Morgen, for your beautiful explanation of why we eat the roasted egg, or we don't eat the roasted egg, but we get to have eggs at our Seder. Yes, my wife made deviled eggs, and they were really good, so that was great. All right, now let us continue in our service. We open the Ark, and we turn to page 56.